Hello children and welcome to the session today. Not only are we studying the first chapter of this book, we are also studying the first chapter of science in your new session. You're in grade 8 now. It is so wonderful to be in the senior school. Right children? So as we proceed in the book, we are going to learn many different things about the scientific world. And we begin our book with the first chapter that teaches us the ways in which the crops are produced. So let us read together chapter number 1, Production of Crops. In this particular chapter, we are going to talk about crop plants, methods of crop production, increasing the agricultural produce, the nitrogen cycle, and food from the animals. So children, we all know that early humans were hunters and gatherers, right? So they used to hunt animals and eat their raw meat, and they used to gather fruits and berries and consume them. However, it is noticed that suddenly early humans felt the need to grow crops. There are certain reasons which are hypothesized why early man had to shift from being a gatherer to being a cultivator. So these reasons are that the change of climate may have restricted the production and harvesting of wild produce. Then, greater population density must have led to an increase in demand of food. Domestication of animals helped early humans to indulge in agricultural practices. Overhunting and overharvesting must have led to dwindling forest resources, and domesticated seeds with better yield over the ages must have made agriculture more promising than hunting and gathering. So children, agriculture is the production of food on a very large scale. And in India, due to the Green Revolution, we have become so self-sufficient in agriculture that not only are we able to feed our entire huge population, but we are also exporting grains to a large extent. So this was about the history of agriculture. Now let us understand the meaning of crop. What is a crop? A crop is a particular kind of crop or a food that is grown on a large scale in a field. So that means if we are growing wheat on a large scale, wheat becomes a crop. Similarly, if we are growing rice on a large scale, it also means that rice is a crop. So anything that you grow on a large scale for human consumption becomes a crop. Now, according to your book, there are 3 kinds of crops. As we can see here, we have been given some examples along with the names that are given to these crops. There are food grains, that are the crops that are grown for feeding human beings and cattle. There are plantation crops. Plantation crops are like tea, coffee, rubber, mango, banana, jute, cotton, hemp, etc. These are grown majorly for sale in the market. Then there are cash crops. Cash crops are grown solely for commercial purpose and not for sale or consumption. So here are given the entire set of examples for you to understand what are the different kinds of crops. Now, other than this children, there are 2 sowing seasons in India. 2 sowing seasons. The first season is the season of the rabi crop. Rabi crops are sown in October, December, and they are harvested in March, April. Then come the kharif crop. Kharif crops are sown at the time of onset of monsoon, which becomes June, July, and they are harvested by the end of September, right before sowing of rabi crops begin. So examples of rabi crops are gram, mustard and pea, and those of kharif crops are rice, maize, etc. Now children, the entire process of crop production or agriculture is a very systematic process. it requires a series of steps that are taken care of at every step of the way. Now, here in the book are the different steps which are involved in agricultural production. So, what can we see here? We can see that the first basic step is soil preparation. So, what is soil preparation? Soil preparation is basically when you are tilling the soil, when you are plowing the soil. So, we all have got pots in our house, and there is an instrument called khurpi. Once or twice in the week, the gardener comes and he turns the soil up and down with the help of that khurpi. What is he doing? He is plowing the soil. Now, when you plow the soil, it becomes loose. Otherwise, the soil is very thick and very hard. So, how does this plowing help? It helps to aerate the soil. What do you mean by aeration? When you add air into anything, it is known as aeration. So, plowing the soil helps to aerate it. There is more air in the soil, and the important organisms in the soil like the earthworm, which are the farmer's friends, they also are able to breathe properly. They are able to move properly in a well plowed soil. So, this is the first step where you prepare the soil. The second step is selection and sowing of seeds. Now, children, how do you select seeds? That is very important. Are you going to use seeds that will give you a very good crop produce, or are you going to use seeds that may or may not give a good yield? How do you decide that? Let's watch a video to understand the same. The next step is the selection and sowing of seeds. Seeds that are clean, healthy, and disease-free are selected and sowed in the soil. Take a beaker of water. Put a handful of wheat seeds in the beaker. Stir the water well and leave the setup undisturbed for some time. You will observe that some seeds float while some settle at the bottom. The seeds that float are damaged and have become hollow. The seeds that sink at the bottom are good and healthy seeds. It is important to sow the seeds at the right depth and at the right intervals. When seeds are scattered over the fields by hand, it is known as broadcasting. This is not an efficient method as it does not ensure proper spacing between seeds at the right depth. Nowadays, seeds are sowed with the help of seed drills, which are connected to the tractors. A seed drill has a funnel-shaped seed bowl connected to several tubes. So, in this video, we understood how we can differentiate between hollow seeds and seeds which will give rise to a new plant. In addition to this, we also have to check that the seeds should not be diseased. The next process after sowing of seeds is manuring. Now, what is manuring? Manures are of two types. First, manures are plant-based, and the second kind of manures are animal waste and plant waste mix. So, manuring is a method in which you add essential nutrients to the soil to make the soil very strong. There are many methods of manuring. The first one is fallowing the land. Fallowing the land means leaving the land without any crops. When you leave the land like that, there are plants, animals, weeds who are all moving about the soil or growing in the soil. There is animal manure in the form of animal dung. So, all these, when they are decomposed, they become manure. Now, the problem with this kind of technique is that because the agricultural land is reducing. Now, why is agricultural land reducing? There is more population. Because of more population, you need more housing. To provide the necessary items to the increasing population, you need more industries. So, all these things are reducing the land that is available for agriculture. That means you have to produce a large amount of crops from the little land that is available. That is the reason fallowing the land is totally eliminated. The second is rotation of crops. There are two crops which are grown alternately, cereals and pulses. After one round of cereals, the farmers grow one round of pulses. Why? Because we have learnt that pulses contain rhizobium in their root nodules. These are nitrogen fixing bacteria. So they increase the nitrogen content of the soil, which is depleted because of growing of cereals. So again, when the soil is replenished in nitrogen, again in the next cycle, cereals are grown. So this is rotation of crops. The next is mixed cropping. So mixed cropping is the exact opposite of rotation of crops. Here, cereals are grown along with pulses, so that whatever nutrients are being depleted, they are being added along at the same time. Next, let us understand the kinds of manures. As we discussed a few minutes ago, that there are manures which are only made up of animal waste, and there are manures which are made up of compost. Compost is animal waste along with decomposing leaves of plants, dead plants, etc. So that makes up compost. Then there is green manure. Some specific crops like trifolium, ryegrass and broad beans are used as green manures. The next way of increasing the fertility of the soil is by addition of fertilizers. Now all the fertilizers are mostly NPK fertilizers. Nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. But the problem with fertilizers is that they are mostly chemical based. Now when you are spraying these fertilizers, you have to be very careful that you are not in contact with these things. Also, when used in a large amount, these fertilizers make the soil acidic and they pollute the water bodies close to it. Now children, coming to the next step in crop production, which is irrigation. Let us watch a video to understand the same. Once the seeds are sowed, crops grow and they need to be watered or irrigated at regular intervals of time. The time and frequency of irrigation depends on the nature of the crop plant, the soil, and the season when the crop is grown. Some traditional methods of irrigation are moat, chair pump, Dekli and Rahat. Modern methods of irrigation are drip system and sprinkler system. In drip system, holes in pipes allow water to fall drop by drop just at the roots of the plant. By this system, water is not lost due to evaporation. Sprinklers are used to water plants to ensure that they get just the right amount of water. Sprinklers are perpendicular pipes having rotating nozzles on top. So we now know that instead of using tube wells like people used to do in earlier times, we have switched to sprinkler and drip irrigation, which is a better way of irrigating the fields. Now once the crops are irrigated, they are ready, the seeds are ready to sprout. What is the next thing that we have to take care of? We have to take care of weeds. What are weeds? Weeds are unnecessary plants that grow along with the main crop. Now there are 4 main kinds of weeds that grow along with the crops here in India. They are Bohevia, Cleome, Amaranthus and Oxalis. You can see Amaranthus and Oxalis specifically growing in your plants that you have in your home gardens as well. Now in order to remove weeds, again weeds can be removed physically by using a khurpi or weedicides have to be added. In a similar way, in order to protect the crops from pests, these pests are rats, they are some kind of insects also. They have to be killed, they have to be removed. as also the fungus that affects the crops. So here we are talking about three different chemicals. We are talking about weedicides that are used to remove weeds. We are talking about insecticides that are used to remove insects and pests. So they can be called insecticides or pesticides. And then there are fungicides. Now, the precautions while using all these three are same. Number one, a person using them has to be totally covered. There has to be no contact, no inhalation of these chemicals. Number two, the direction of air on the day of spraying is very important. If you are spraying against the air, this insecticide or this chemical is going to come to you. What is going to happen? Again, the person spraying, that is us, if we are spraying against the air, it is going to come to us. We may either inhale it or touch it by mistake. The third important thing is the quantity in which we are using this. So if we use this in excess amount, one, they get deposited on the crop that we are going to eat. Number two, they are added to the soil, unnecessarily destroying the soil. Number three, with irrigation waste water, they will be carried into nearby sources of water. And that is how their concentration is going to increase in the food chain. So this was about taking care of the crop till it is ripe. When the crop is ripe, the next step is to cut it from the field. That is called harvesting. Let us understand more about harvesting. Once the crop is fully grown, it has to be harvested. Harvesting is the process of cutting and gathering crops after it is ready and ripe. Harvesting is done manually by a sickle or by a machine called a harvester. Once the crop is harvested, the grain seeds are separated from the chaff by the process called threshing. A combined machine performs the dual job of harvesting and threshing. Once the grains are separated, they are winnowed to separate the seeds from chaff. So, harvesting also includes threshing and winnowing. Once, children, the grain is separated from the husk, this husk also finds use. For example, paddy husk. It is a good source of rice bran oil, which is a blending material for edible oils. Wheat and rice stem chaff is used to feed cattle and making soft boards. Stems of chickpea are strong. They are used to make baskets and as a hedge material. Now, children, let's go back to the stages of crop production. So, we have seen here that selection and sowing of seeds was taken care of, manuring, adding of fertilizers taken care of, irrigation done, weed removal done, crop protection done. Now let's come to post-production. Post-production includes harvesting, threshing and winnowing. And in the end comes storage. So in storage, what do we have to do? Similar things that affect the standing crops, they also affect the grains. Now, what are these things? These are moisture, most important, because moisture will lead to the growth of fungus, which will spoil the stored grain. The second one is insects and pests like rats, birds, locusts, etc., which that is why storage becomes very important. Now, before storing the grains in these huge buildings, which are specifically known as silos, they are fumigated with substances, insecticides and other chemicals that will cease the growth of fungus, insects and pests. They are completely dried so that moisture is also ruled out. Then these grains are stored in gunny bags and they are piled on top of one another in the silos. And from here they travel to the markets. Now, children, modern seeds are created by the process of hybridization. Hybridization is when you take two plants of desired quality and you cross them to produce a third new plant. Now let us understand this flow chart. The outline of hybridization is as under. Plant with first set of characteristics is mixed with plant with second set of characteristics. Emasculation, obtaining pollen from plants. Artificial pollination for several generations. Hybrid plant with desired characters. Obtaining the seeds, maintaining the seeds stock. So all these processes like hybridization, identifying of the diseases that affect the plant, all these things were a part of Green Revolution. So revolution means any big change. Green Revolution means a big change in the field of crops. Now this change in India was possible because of these two great gentlemen who understood the Indian climate, the kind of products that are used here, the kind of seeds that are used to produce, and they were able to provide several solutions including hybridization that increased the production of crops in India. Now children, a few minutes ago we were talking about rotation of crops and mixed cropping. We were talking about pulses with rhizobium which fix nitrogen. So that means nitrogen is a very, very important part of the crop production cycle. Now let us understand the nitrogen cycle in nature. Nitrogen cycle is a biogeochemical process through which nitrogen is converted into many forms, consecutively passing from the atmosphere to the soil to organism and back into the atmosphere. It involves several processes such as nitrogen fixation, nitrification, denitrification, decay, and putrefaction. Nitrogen gas exists in both organic and inorganic forms. Organic nitrogen exists in living organisms and they get passed through the food chain by the consumption of other living organisms. Inorganic forms of nitrogen are found in abundance in the atmosphere. The nitrogen is made available to plants by symbiotic bacteria called rhizobium, which convert the nitrogen in the air into usable form, that is nitrites and nitrates. During the process of nitrogen fixation, the inert form of nitrogen gas is deposited in the soil from the atmosphere, mainly through precipitation. Nitrogen fixation can occur either by atmospheric fixation that involves lightning or industrial fixation by manufacturing ammonia under high temperature and pressure conditions. This can also be fixed by man-made process, primary industrial processes that create ammonia and nitrogen-rich fertilizers. So children, this was about the nitrogen cycle. Now in this chapter, you have very well understood the various stages of crop production. You've also understood how at each step there are many precautions to be taken. So children, the food that reaches your plate requires so much of effort. Would you want to waste your food the next time? I'm sure you're going to remember this chapter the next time you decide that this is not what you want to eat. Thank you for joining the session today.